Welcome back to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. And now, let's start with the first story. It's called Security Deposits. My cousin goes to a private school that gives out laptops at the beginning of the school year. These laptops hold the vast majority of their schoolwork, and as such the school installed custom software to limit their usage to school-related activities. Because of this, everyone who received a laptop was required to pay a $200 security deposit that wouldn't be returned if the laptop was damaged or lost. As the end of the school year approached, students started returning their laptops. However, the school began claiming bogus damages on the laptops, keeping the $200 deposits. Naturally, this didn't sit well with a lot of the students and parents, who knew the laptops were in good condition. So they started claiming that their laptops were lost, figuring they might as well let the school keep the deposit, since they weren't getting it back anyway. My cousin was one of these students. As more and more students did this, the school went into full dictator mode, announcing that students would not be allowed to graduate if they didn't return their laptops. This, of course, went against the original signed agreement or contract, and it set off a powder keg of frustration. Several parents got their lawyers involved and filed a lawsuit against the school for breach of contract. Students refused to attend class for the final weeks. Parents were protesting on the school lawn, and some faculty and staff members even quit. It turned into a full-blown crisis. In the end, the school settled it out of court, because they couldn't handle the bad PR any longer. Part of the settlement included the return of the deposits for the laptop's return. But my cousin wasn't giving hers back. She asked me to jailbreak the software so it would function like a regular laptop, which I did. All I had to do was save her personal data and wipe the software off the laptop. The next story is called Strict Schedule. Last year, I had a bit of an incident with one of my professors. Looking back, I do feel a little bad for the guy. He wasn't the worst professor I'd ever had, but he was dealing with a university that was in a bit of turmoil behind the scenes, and was tasked with teaching an untested new course. That said, I was paying quite a lot for my education, and his attitude about the situation didn't really help. It was a history course, and one of the assignments was a group project, where we had to present in front of the class. There was a 3-hour seminar in our lecture hall, with the last hour reserved for 2 groups to present, each given 30 minutes. After each presentation, there was a Q&A session, probably to keep us on our toes. The professor really emphasized that once you picked your presentation week and topic, you were locked in. It was first come first serve, and if you've missed your spot, you got a 0. At the time, that seemed fair, though I didn't like his attitude about it. Luckily, I ended up with a great group to work with. We chose a week that worked for all our schedules, and we spent a lot of time fine-tuning the presentation. We even timed it with a stopwatch, and invited friends to ask us unpredictable questions to simulate the Q&A. Everything was going great, until week 5 rolled around. We noticed a disturbing pattern during the presentations in week 2, 3 and 4. For all of his talk about keeping things on schedule, the first group would always run long, leaving the second group with only 20 minutes at best. It was stressful to watch, so by the time our week came, my group was understandably nervous. We put in so much work, and it looked like we were going to end up like the other groups, rushed through our presentation. I decided to take a chance and asked the professor if our group could present first, since we timed our presentation perfectly to 30 minutes. I figured the worst he could say was no. Well, he didn't just say no. In front of everyone who was filling into the room, he raked me across the coals. He called it a stupid question and told me to sit down. I was furious, but I went back to my seat, feeling embarrassed and angry. Sure enough, when the other group ran first, they ran long. We kept shooting worried looks at the professor, but he was too busy watching the other group to notice. At the 50-minute mark, they finally wrapped up, and we were freaking out. Then the professor stands up and, with a smile, says, Well, I guess we are finishing early today, huh? The four of us stood up like a shot and asked, what the heck is going on? He couldn't hear us clearly from the back of the room, so he asked, what's going on? At that point, I stormed down those steps like I was on a mission. In the same calm tone he used to embarrass me earlier, I told him that we were scheduled to present today, and that we had prepared a full presentation. Turns out the professor had completely forgotten that we were supposed to present, which explained why he was so mad at me for asking to go first. I wasn't about to let this slide. I told him that we were either presenting now, even to an empty room, or he was giving us 100%. He tried to wriggle out of it, claiming we hadn't signed up for that week. We had, offering to reschedule us for next week. 2 of our group members were going to be on a placement for their teaching degrees, and even saying he had somewhere else to be. Not my problem, buddy. He had no choice but to accept the situation. After making a phone call to whoever he was supposed to meet, he stayed there, white as a sheet, and listened to our presentation. So we presented to an almost empty lecture hall, just the professor and 2 students who decided to stick around. We got a great grade in the end, but I'll never forget the look on that professor's face. The last story is called New School Policy. When I was in high school, we got a new principal who introduced a very annoying policy. Twice a week we had to stay extra time in homeroom and write about a prompt. Now, I love to write fiction, but the prompts we got were always this Hallmark level, after school special nonsense. Think along the lines of, write about a time you and your friend had an argument and how you worked through it. They were so stale and generic, and it felt like a total waste of time for both students and teachers. I don't know why, but they really bugged me. Sometimes I'd refuse to write anything, and sometimes I'd just scribble down 2 sentences to appease my teacher. One day we got a prompt along the lines of, write about a time when you felt disrespected and how you overcame it. At first I refused to write, but my teacher, who was actually my favorite, pushed me, saying I needed to turn in something. I sat there for a bit, thinking, and then the perfect scenario popped into my head. I felt like the Grinch grinning at my own idea. I decided to write about my orientation at the school. You see, when I went to orientation, my mom came with me. The session started in the auditorium, with the principal giving a speech, and we sat in the front row. That's when I noticed the principal checking out my mom. Like, not just a quick glance. He was straight up staring multiple times. Afterward, my mom had some questions for him, so we went up to talk. And once again, I noticed him checking her out. She was just wearing a basic t-shirt, but still, there was some cleavage. Later, my mom said how nice he seemed, and I just looked at her and said, Mom, he was checking you out the whole time. And we left it at that. So I wrote about this incident for the prompt. I wrote how he never apologized, and how I felt like he had disrespected both my mom and me. I turned it in with the biggest grin on my face. Now, being my favorite teacher, they knew something was up when I had actually completed this writing prompt and was happy about it. The moment I sat down, the teacher immediately started reading it. Halfway through, they let out a surprised loud, haha. The class looked at me confused, but I just smiled and asked, what's wrong, teacher? Something funny? He just snickered quietly, and I knew I'd hit my mark. I thought that was the end of it, but later I got called to the guidance counselor's office. They had my writing and asked me about it. One of the first things they said was, I'm sure he wasn't really staring at her chest. Sometimes he just isn't paying attention. That immediately made it worse for me. Like, seriously? You are defending him? When they realized that wasn't going over well, they switched to, I'm sorry you both felt this way about the interaction. Would you like us to talk to him about it? We could arrange for him to apologize to you both, if that will help resolve things. I just said no. Honestly, I didn't think it was a huge deal at the time. I mainly wrote about it to throw his stupid prompt back in his face, not to get an apology. I'm not sure if he ever saw or heard about my writing, but it was definitely a satisfying morning for me. Thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like comment and subscribe. And if you have time, watch another one of my videos. Also, if you want to support me further, check out the channel membership or Patreon. And now I hope you have a great day. See you soon. Bye bye.